where we are just learning new details on the public release of the Mueller report. Moments ago, a Justice Department official telling NBC News it will take, quote, weeks, not months, for Barr to make a version of Mueller's original report public. That official stressing that there are no plans to give a copy of the report to the White House ahead of that public release. This critical update coming as we learn in brand new reporting from the Washington Post, new details about Robert Mueller's refusal to render any judgment on whether Donald Trump obstructed justice with his repeated attempts to thwart the special counsel probe. From that new report, quote, during a briefing at the Justice Department about 3 weeks ago, Special Counsel Robert Mueller made a revelation that those supervising his work were not expecting. A person familiar with the matter said he would not offer a conclusion on whether he believed President Trump sought to obstruct justice. The decision, which a Justice Department official on Monday said the special counsel's office came to entirely on its own, left a gap ripe for political exploitation. After accepting Mueller's report, Attorney General Barr and Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, who were among those briefed on March 5th, made the call that Mueller would not, determining that the evidence was insufficient to allege that Trump had obstructed justice. And it's the obstruction investigation that persists as the hanging chad of the probe, primarily because Mueller reached no conclusion and because the people who then took that decision into their own hands were the very people the special counsel regulation was designed to protect a sensitive investigation from, as Mike Schmidt from the New York Times explains today.
Part of the reason the special counsel is there is to give the public the assurance that a investigator who's not politically tied to the person under investigation is doing the work and following the facts. And in this case, that person, Mueller, said, I can't come to a determination on this, and kicked it up to the folks above him who are the political appointees.
And now there's reason to suspect that the Mueller report could contain an obstruction case that's damning enough that even with that incredibly high bar that an obstruction case against a sitting president must pass, Robert Mueller, for his part, refused to exonerate Donald Trump. And brand new NBC News reporting reveals that it was the obstruction investigation all along that worried the president most. Quote, Donald Trump's lawyers, including the ones who don't appear on television but spent a career practicing federal criminal law, never seriously worried that their client would be accused of a Russia conspiracy. Three sources familiar with the matter told NBC News. For Martin and Jane Raskin, a husband and wife duo from Miami who came aboard Trump's legal team last April, the real threat was obstruction of justice. And that's where we start today with some of our favorite reporters and friends. Devlin Barrett, national security reporter for the Washington Post, with that great reporting we led with. At the table, Matt Miller, a former chief spokesman at the Department of Justice, former Democratic Congresswoman Donna Edwards, Axios political reporter Alexi McCammon, and Jeremy Bashesback, a former chief of staff at both the CIA and Pentagon. Devlin, your reporting catching the attention of everybody here, and I'm sure at the Justice Department and the White House. Tell us about it.
Well, so we're told that, this is fairly recently, that the Mueller report will likely not be made public for a number of weeks. That gives us a little bit of a window into how this work is going. Obviously, there's a lot to review, and there's a couple different steps they have to go through. First of all, being grand jury information. And so, but now we know that that's likely to take weeks. And, you know, that'll be an interesting time period because people are going to keep trying to figure out what really happened until that document is out there.
And from your reporting, we read this section where you take us inside the room, essentially, where Robert Mueller told the senior DOJ officials, the political appointees, the new Attorney General Barr, with a known point of view on obstruction, and Rod Rosenstein, a known witness in the special counsel investigation, that he would not reach a conclusion on obstruction. Tell us what happened next.
Well, we're told that that was received with surprise by both Rosenstein and Barr. And that's interesting because Barr is fairly new to this process, but Rod Rosenstein has been there from day one. Rod Rosenstein started this process. He appointed the special counsel. So it's interesting to me that people who are talking to us say that Rod Rosenstein was also surprised by that statement by Mueller. And the other part that's interesting to me, and I don't think we really understand enough to really know what it means yet, is that Mueller said he would not reach a conclusion on that. I'm very curious because that makes it sound like a deliberate choice on Mueller's part. Not that he was stuck, not that he was, just at wit's end about it, but that he would not reach a conclusion. And
Sorry.
No, I just think there's a lot to understand there. Yeah.
You also add a little detail that was not clear yesterday. There has been some mixed analysis. Some people saying that Barr went in and did what Mueller could not do. And it doesn't seem that that's the case. And I think this is the distinction you're starting to make. It was that Mueller would not do it. Now, is there you describe a gap that the political appointees went in and sought to fill. But Mueller refusing to exonerate Trump speaks to what may have been a pretty devastating obstruction of justice case that they assembled. And I know the Barr summary itself references all of the obstruction in full view. Even the Barr summary acknowledges that there was obstruction that we don't even know about.
Well, that's true, but Barr also is very forceful in his language, saying that the acts don't meet any of the three prongs legally necessary to level an obstruction accusation. Barr is obviously very forceful in how he feels about this. What we really don't understand yet is Mueller equivocating here? Does he see some more complex process that should play out that doesn't involve his office? That's what we don't know, and that's really what everyone's trying to figure out right now.
I know Robert Mueller. Robert Mueller doesn't equivocate.
Yeah, he doesn't equivocate, and I don't think he shies away from hard decisions. I don't think he was afraid to make this decision. Look, I used to be the spokesman for the Justice Department. Yeah, I used to do a lot of spinning on the Justice Department's behalf to reporters, including to Devlin. And you can see the spin coming from the Justice Department here. There were two major criticisms of what Bill Barr did. One, that he inserted himself into the process when he didn't need to, that he took a decision that Robert Mueller had declined to make for a legitimate reason. We don't know what that reason was yet, but I think it's safe to say it wasn't because he was afraid to make it. And two, that he did it hastily, that he did it over a 48-hour period when he got this report. The spin coming from the Justice Department is, one, we were told this 3 weeks ago. We may not have seen the report, but he had 3 weeks to think about it, even if he hadn't seen the full underlying evidence yet. And two, that this came as a surprise, and that the line that they used in the letter was it left the decision to the Attorney General. What we're not hearing from the Justice Department, and I think it's telling that they can't tell us the answer to this, is what did Bob Mueller expect to happen? Why didn't he make this decision? Was he expecting the Attorney General to make it? Was he recommending that someone other than him at the Justice Department make it, or was he leaving it to Congress? If the Justice Department had an answer to that question that didn't make it look like the Attorney General had stepped in to make the decision on his own, you can bet they'd be giving it out to reporters right now.
And the Barr... Look, Barr undeniably has a perception problem. The special counsel regulation crafted, created, inspired by the idea that you take the most sensitive criminal investigations, take them out of politics and put them in the hands of an unimpeachable individual. That was Robert Mueller. That investigation was walled off from political influence everywhere except from the Oval Office, from the president, who tweeted and harassed and cajoled. Then at the very end, they hand the fragile, pure baby to a political appointee in the Attorney General with very aggressive views on obstruction of justice, and a Deputy Attorney General who's a witness in the investigation.
So the reference you make to the very aggressive views is the critical point here. It's the memo that Bill Barr wrote before he was tapped for this job, that he wrote unsolicited to the Justice Department, saying that the president shouldn't even be questioned about the lines of obstruction inquiry that he knew that Bob Mueller was pursuing. It has always seemed to me quite a coincidence that of all the lawyers in the country who are qualified to be Attorney General, that Donald Trump picked the one who had taken that position and argued it to the Justice Department. He thought he was getting an Attorney General who would help him out in this investigation. And Bill Barr at the hearing said, trust me, I will follow the rules, I will follow law. And at least Republican senators were willing to trust him. And what we saw last week is why a lot of people on the other side didn't want to trust him, because they were afraid he'd do something like this.
But let's just call it, and our viewers know enough about all the players to understand who we're talking about. There's no way Donald Trump understood the nuances of the obstruction statute. But Emmett Flood probably did.
Yeah.
The White House counsel who went in there with much more aggressive views on executive privilege than the people who'd overseen the investigation before him. And their biggest problem was that Don McGahn, the first White House counsel, had spent 30 hours that we knew of testifying in the obstruction investigation.
Yeah. Emmett Flood understood the details. Donald Trump understood that this was someone that took my side, and hoped, in the way that he hoped Jeff Sessions would intervene on his behalf, and he wouldn't, hoped that Bill Barr would intervene on his behalf. Up until last Friday, Bill Barr hadn't given us any reason to think he would do anything inappropriate. And then at this last moment, we get him intervening, putting his thumb on the scale, and giving the president a talking point that Bob Mueller wasn't able to. And and that's that he was cleared on obstruction of justice. Bob Mueller wouldn't give him that. Bill Barr did.
Jeremy.
Well, I think Matt's exactly right. And the sentence from the audition memo that Bill Barr authored back before he was nominated that jumps off the page is the following. The Constitution, he wrote, places no limit on the president's authority to act on matters which concern him or his own conduct. That's a statement from Bill Barr's audition letter. The Constitution places no limits. Now think about that. We live in a democracy. We live in a republic in which the president has limitless power. That's Bill Barr's view of the office of the president in the context of presidential authority over his own conduct. So it should have surprised nobody that when he got the file from Bob Mueller, he said any criminal intent impugned to the president is actually just presidential intent. And under our Constitution, presidential intent is limitless. So therefore, no crime was committed. That is a massive arrogation of power to the presidency, and it's a very expansive doctrine in terms of presidential power. And I think it needs to be scrutinized.
We know that Bob Mueller doesn't share that view, because if he did, the line, "We do not exonerate Donald Trump," would not appear in the Mueller report that was quoted in the Barr summary.
And I've heard some analysts say that actually this was Mueller's rebellion. In some ways, what he said was, I can't make a finding about criminal intent because I haven't interviewed the president. And let's put aside for the question of why he wasn't able to subpoena the president and get an interview with the president. But he didn't, and he didn't pursue that end. But therefore, he couldn't make a judgment on intent, which is critical for the obstruction statute. But yet he was willing to say, I cannot exonerate the president. It's his way of, I think, telegraphing there's more to see here.
Alexei, the president has leapfrogged over what is likely an obstruction report that is, at a minimum, embarrassing, at a maximum, that I think you're right. There may have been some dissent inside the Mueller probe about how to resolve this, which is why they didn't. Where do the sort of politics around the release of the report go? The Justice Department making a point today of saying the White House won't see this before the public does. That seems to be an acknowledgement that they're digging a hole for themselves politically in terms of the optics here.
Right. Well, and it's no secret that Donald Trump obviously wants to see this thing, and he already feels vindicated by it, claiming vengeance. But I think that's the interesting part of the politics around this. He has gone from claiming vindication before any of us had even known what was going on with the Mueller investigation to having it end, having this very quick sort of victory dance, which is now turning into a vengeful phase. The Trump campaign released that list of people they want to bar from networks because they say they're so unfair to him. They're trying to shift the politics of this by exerting more control over folks in a way that maybe he felt he was lacking throughout this entire investigation. And now that it's over, it's kind of a race to the bottom for him to say, this is not just a witch hunt, you were all wrong. And we're going to set up this dichotomy in which Democrats and everyone who supports them is not telling you the truth. And I've been telling you the truth for 2+ years, and I've done nothing wrong. And I think that is just a really bad sort of slippery slope for us to go into, especially heading into the 2020 election, when there are so many Senate Democrats running who may have been absolved from having to talk about the Mueller report, but because they are still in the Senate, they're going to have to be talking about this mess for as long as President Trump drags it out. And we know that he loves a political fight, so who knows how long this will last.
Well, I just think, obviously, this has a phase 2. And the phase 2 is going to be the other criminal investigations out of the Southern District of New York. It's going to be the Attorney General investigation out of New York. It's going to be congressional scrutiny of other aspects of the Trump Organization and financial dealings. And it's ultimately going to be congressional scrutiny of the actual report, the underlying documents. After all, how fast did those FBI 302s in the Hillary Clinton email investigation go running up to the Hill as soon as Jim Jordan and other Republicans requested it? So there's a lot more investigating to do on this matter.
Donna, it would seem that if Democrats had learned on Sunday in the Barr summary of the Mueller report, and it's worth saying that that is all we have, the Barr summary, which does not quote a single complete sentence from Robert S. Mueller's 2-year investigation. All that Democrats have is the Barr summary of the Mueller report, which in it has a non-conclusion around obstruction. It would seem that, and I think that, and you've said it, Democrats have to walk and chew gum. They have to talk about health care. They have to talk about pocketbook issues. They have to talk about the economy. They have to talk about Donald Trump's ongoing abuses of power. A Trump ally said to me today that even if Mueller didn't catch him in the Russia probe, give him till the end of the week, Donald Trump is sure to abuse his power by then. Democrats now, with the obstruction conclusion being a non-conclusion from Robert Mueller, seem to have an obligation to at least look at that, vet it themselves and see if there is a political conclusion that Robert Mueller couldn't reach in a criminal context?
Well, I think that's exactly right, and it's why Democrats have, the chairman have demanded this report by April 2nd. What happens after April 2nd and they don't get it? I mean, we might be into a subpoena phase in terms of the report, but I think the Barr summary, to me, raised far more questions than we actually had with his original letter announcing that the report was available. And so I think it's incumbent on Democrats to examine the report, the underlying documents, for the public to see that. Robert Mueller was reporting to the public. He wasn't reporting to Barr to offer a summary of that report, and really a summary where we can't even test the details because we haven't seen the report. And I think, you know, whether this comes out in one piece or in drips or drabs, it will come out. And I think the president is digging a hole for himself because he's declared himself fully exonerated when clearly the report, even the half sentences that we have, show that he's not completely exonerated.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.